Hello, my name is Neil Davidson and I'm the founder of Raw Umber Studios. Welcome to another online portrait drawing session. This video mimics the structure of a regular life drawing class. We'll show you 3 photographs on the screen, one for 10 minutes, one for 20 minutes, and one for 30 minutes, and it's your job to draw the photograph that you see. Lizet will be joining us. She'll be doing a demonstration in the bottom corner of the screen and giving hints and tips. Once you've finished, don't forget to post your work to Instagram and hashtag it with #RawUmberLive. Right, let's get started.
Hello everybody and welcome to another Raw Umber portrait video. This week I'll be using charcoal as well as a normal putty rubber. So as some people were asking about different methods of constructing their heads, I decided to do the Riley method this week. And I'm going to start by placing her on the paper. Now the thing is with Riley, he didn't actually write any books. So we have to sort of guess what all the diagrams mean. So the way I interpreted it is that he's looking for fluid lines that go through different forms. So for instance, I start with a circle and when you see the jawline, I take it all the way from the middle and bring it all the way down to the bottom of the chin. And starting with a circle is very similar to Loomis, whereas Loomis is a little bit more measurement based. Riley is a little bit, or seems a little bit more based on just fluid line work. So I'm going to start with dividing my face into 3/3 again. So taking that middle line, going halves on that and the bottom of the chin, and then I go up 1/3 as well. And now with her ear, you can see that her ear is located in between the corner of the eye and the bottom of the nose. So I can place it right there. And I can already see that my skull is probably going to be a bit too narrow because it barely fits the ear, but I'll fix that later. And one line I see a lot in these Riley diagrams is a line going from the top of the ear, sort of following the top of the cheekbone. You can see a little shadow there and going down towards the corner of the mouth. Another line you often see is a line going from that same point, but then now to the brow. And the nose is roughly from that midpoint of the circle towards that lower 1/3. And this is just a placeholder for now. I'm just trying to figure out where everything is. When you look at the front of the eyeball, you can see that it's sort of flat in the front. And then you can imagine the bulk of the eyeball sort of being behind that. Now, of course, you don't see the actual eyeball completely. It's being obscured by the lids, so we can just put the lids on top. So this method is all about taking lines through. So another line we could take through, for instance, is going from the brow. You can sort of see how that recedes back into towards the eyeball. And also most lines that Riley uses are curved. So trying to go for big curved lines. So for instance, with the brow, I try not to use straight lines. I try to make a sort of curved general impression of what I see on the model. And now I've got a bit more information and I can actually see that the bridge of the nose is actually a little bit higher than I thought it was. So you can just adjust things as and when you see them. And in spirit of taking lines through, I'm actually going to take that sort of line in front of the eye socket and take it all the way down towards the chin. Because I can see it connecting up a little bit with the corner of the mouth. Another place where you can imagine a line going through is the front of the face, the bottom of the nose to the bottom of the chin. If you can imagine there's a line there, you can see that it connects the lips up with the tip of the nose and the plane of the chin. And regardless if you want to call that the Riley method or not, I'm sure I'm doing it slightly wrong for people who use it all the time. I personally never really use it. One thing that is really useful is to take these lines through. So instead of just drawing the lips as a sort of entity on its own, trying to connect how it sort of relates to everything else in the face. And that will make your face look a lot more structured and more well constructed. And because of that, it will be a better portrait. So I'm going to continue trying to find some lines that connect and trying to take lines through and sort of seeing how far that takes me for the 10 minutes. In the 20 minutes, I'm going to do something very similar, but I'm going to keep focusing on volumes because I think that's also very important. Okay, so here we are for the 20-minute pose, and I'm going to start by placing her on the paper where I want her. And again, starting with that big round shape for the skull. And what I'm trying to do is have fluid lines, so rounded, big lines. So you can imagine that the halfway point of that ball, if it was a 3D ball, will be about there. And you could take the jawline from there. And again, divide that face up into 3/3. And I have to say, this is actually a very tricky pose because she's looking away. 3/4 heads are always the hardest. Plus, she is looking sort of down, but is looking up with her eyes. It's a really interesting pose, but you might find that it's tricky to draw. And try not to be harsh on yourself and feel like, I don't know why this doesn't work. It's actually just because it's a very hard angle to draw. Okay, so next I'm placing the ear between that brow line and the bottom of the nose. Again, just a very rough placement. And then I'm placing the shoulders as well. I find that with placing these big fluid lines, I tend to think of them as they're going to be wrong anyway. So I prepare myself having to change them later. And that helps me because it makes me less attached to my drawing, which is a good thing because it leaves you to be a bit more flexible. I remember that point from the top of the ear going all the way down the cheekbone. So I'm doing that on both sides. And then also figuring out where the nose is. So always working from big to small, always trying to work from the bigger planes, trying to think of it in 3D volumes, and then going into smaller ones as we break the drawing down a little bit more. Okay, so like last time, I'm going to just sort of put the eyeballs in. This does look a little bit weird at the start, but it's so much easier to put the lids on top of that, because you can imagine how the lids turn with that round shape instead of just a flat sort of looking eye. Also, when you're doing the pupils and the irises, imagine that they should be positioned exactly the same place on that eyeball. So if one is sort of in the top left corner, then the other one should also be in the top left corner. And this ensures that both eyeballs will look the same direction, especially if you've got a eyeball that doesn't look straight at you. This might really help to think about it like that. And I'm going to continue now sketching out the brows using long fluid lines. as well as other areas of the face. So I need to spend a little bit of time on the mouth area, for instance. Some of you may already see that I made the forehead way too big, and this is because I know that I've got a natural tendency to straighten up the head, and I want to make sure that she was really looking down, but I really went quite far in adding a lot of hair on top of the head and completely forgetting about my round skull that I sketched out earlier. And here I realized that I forgot about that initial sketch, and I tried to sort of bring it all in a little bit more. And you can see what a huge difference that makes. And, you know, I could have cut it out, but I think it's useful. I found it always the most useful to see my teachers make mistakes and know that it's fixable. So you might find it useful to see how I went completely wrong there. And with that, I also realized that my ear was too high, so I'm going to just drop that down a little bit. So I've put that big mess of the hair in, but now I want to start shading. And this is quite unusual because the light's coming from this direction. Or even, let's just move a little bit to the left so it's a bit easier to see. So the light's coming from the bottom right. That's what I'm trying to say here. And what that means is that usually the light comes from the sky or light above. So the top lids will be lit. But in this case, all the things that are usually lit, everything going towards the ceiling will be dark. So the top lids will be dark. Actually, the high plane, so the plane just before it touches the eyeball, will also be dark. And everything like the bottom of the nose and the bottom of the top lip, all those things that are usually dark, in this case, will be light. So really, really good practice. But like I said, it's a little bit of a tricky pose. So if this is your first one, don't be discouraged. We like to switch it up sometimes, but next one will probably be a lot easier. To blend, I'm using a Q-tip, which is very, very useful for blending. You can also use it for painting if you're wanting to blend your oil paint. You can also use a stump or your finger or a little brush, or you can choose not to blend at all. But I find blending, it helps me see a little bit better. So you don't have all that noise of the charcoal everywhere. So I'm just going to continue exploring what's light and what is dark in this lighting situation. And while I'm exploring that light and dark contrast, I also like to break things down. So for instance, I'm sort of trying to work out where the nostrils are, again using as big and as fluid a line as I can, and then putting the shading on top. And you can see how useful it is that I took that side plane first, because then I can just adjust little things within that instead of having to start from scratch, but where I have to sort of figure out where that nostril is floating in the middle of the face. When working on the lips, there's always the same shapes you should be looking for. So the lower lip will be widest at the bottom and get more narrow towards the corner of the mouth. The same for the top lip, except that there will be two little bulges where the middle of the lip sort of goes into a little V shape. And once you've got this, make sure that it does turn with the rest of the face as well. Then you can start making it more like her lips. But the general lip shape is the same for everyone. So I'm just going to continue breaking stuff down a little bit more. Feel free to ask me any questions you have in the comments. I'm here to answer any question for something you find difficult or something you don't understand. And I will get back to you in a bit. So that's it for the 20-minute pose. Like I said, I found it at least very, very tricky. Hopefully the 30-minute pose will be a little bit easier, but again, it's quite a challenging pose, which is very fun. You need to be challenged when you're drawing, of course. So let's see how that goes in a minute. Okay, so here we are for the 30-minute pose. Again, a very tricky one, especially since she's looking down, her face is half in shadow. So there's a few problems we're going to have to be solving with this particular pose. So I'm going to start as per usual, adding her on the paper and adding the round shape for the cranium for the main mass of the skull. And because she's looking down, that eye line won't be in the middle of the ball of the skull. It will actually be a lot further down than you'd think. From there, I can start dividing the face into thirds again. And now I'm looking for that side plane, so trying to figure out where the side is. And that's the start of the jawline right there. And following the lines of the nose and the eye, I sort of roughly know where the ear is. And once I know where the ear is, I can also start figuring out where that big muscle is that goes from behind the ear to the pit of the neck, the mastoid muscle. Finally, when I'm drawing in the shoulders, try and continue the line. So you're not just having the shoulders as separate entities. Try to sort of figure out how they connect together behind the neck. And again, using that line from the top of the ear towards the top of the cheekbone, towards the side of the chin. So that's the sides of the skull. And then I'm going to place my eyeball straight away. And once I've got those in, I can do the same thing like I did with a 20-minute pose, just figuring out how they relate to the bone of the nose and the top brow bone. And again, trying to use big fluid lines here. Now, because she's looking down, we're not actually going to see a lot of the opening of the eye, but it's important to know where the inner corners are, because they will never change and then sort of have the lids turn with the form of the eyeball. So the brow follows the brow bone, and if you feel it on yourself, it actually sticks out quite a lot on the side there. So I'm just going to put that in again using fluid lines. And then following up with the cheekbones, which are widest just below the eyes. And the key to drawing a portrait is always going to be symmetry. You always want to make sure that the brows are relating in the same way. They both have the same high points. They both have the same widths. And that way you don't get a slightly wonky portrait. So That's always the most important thing, whatever technique I use. Is it Loomis or my own or Riley or whatever? And Riley is really good because it makes you draw those big lines, which sort of helps with the symmetry of the face. Just figuring out the block of the nose now. It's a bit lower in the middle. The wings are a little bit higher usually than the middle of the nose. And then it's a sort of V-shaped block there that goes from the inner corners out and sort of touches on the outer corners of the mouth. Now I've got a rough idea where most of my volumes are located. I can be a little bit more confident with my lines, especially with the outline. Going to put in the mass of the hair. That should be a little bit bigger than the skull, but hopefully not quite as big as I did in the 20-minute pose. And I'm just going to start refining the features of the face. I realized that my center line, the line going from the middle of the chin to the middle of the forehead, was actually a bit too straight and didn't follow the curve of the skull. So that means that I need to move my nose a little bit to the right to accommodate that curve. When drawing the shoulders, the collarbones sort of lay in a sort of cradle shape, cradling the rib cage. So you can just sort of use a half moon shape for them. And I realized I haven't really drawn the hand in that much. I did touch on the hands during the figure pose last week, but I just want to talk a little bit more about the hands now as well during the portrait, just because she's got a big hand in there, right? So when you've got the hands, it usually is a little bit of a fan shape, and it goes sort of widest around the knuckles, and the fingers also narrow down into a point. So you can think of it as sort of a hoof. And on top of that, there are actually not really any muscles in the hand except a big one for the thumb and then another one just on the side there. So those are the only two masses that you'll find in the hands. So you can see that as well on my hand. If I just sort of have it in the picture, you can see that it's widest at the knuckles and then a big mass for the thumb and the smaller mass on the side. And you can also see that it's not really useful to split the fingers in the middle. Try to always block them either at the pointing finger or at the little finger, just because it's a little bit more natural. So with the hands, I try to figure out the block of the thumb, the block of that other muscle on the other side, on the pinky side. And then the fingers, sort of just unify them into one big shape for now. And then that is most of what you need to already get an idea of what the hand is doing. So now I'm going to get into shading. When drawing the lips, there's a few main shapes that you want to keep track of. In the lower lip, there is one big block in the middle that's sort of wide, and then two more narrow ones on the sides. With the top lip, you have a sort of heart shape, two round forms in the middle, and that's also where that lip sort of dips down. And then actually it sort of goes up, sort of following that heart shape, and then goes down again into a sort of half moon shape towards the corner of the mouth. And the corner of the mouth is important because it sort of is where the lip attaches to the rest of the face. The lip is, of course, not a cut. It doesn't abruptly stop, so the skin sort of falls under where the corner of the mouth is, and it's slightly different on everyone, and it can help a lot with the likeness. So I'm going to continue shading, and make sure that when you are shading that the dark accents are sort of sitting there in a way that makes relative sense. So for instance, when there's a dark accent in the lids, what I try to do is I squint at the surrounding shadows and see when it disappears. If it disappears quicker on the photo than it does on your drawing, then you need to bring those two values, those two tones closer together, because otherwise it will look sort of a little bit fake. So that's what I try to do constantly. I try to balance the accents in the shadows with the unity of the shadows as well. And that's always tricky when you've got something that is half in shadow. Okay, so that's it for the 30-minute pose. I hope that was enjoyable, even though the poses were quite tricky, or maybe you found them very easy, even better. Make sure to post your drawings under hashtag #RawUmberLife if you want us to have a look at them. We always really enjoy seeing them. And if you have any suggestions for future videos, I know someone last week suggested expressions, so that's something I'm going to get to, but any other suggestions are always very welcome. And finally, if you'd like me to guide you through a drawing from start to finish a little bit longer, I do have a bark tutorial, which is a very good drawing course, 18th century, on the subscription service. So that might be something worth looking into if you're looking for a slightly longer drawing than these quick ones.
Thank you for taking part. Don't forget to photograph your work and post it on Instagram and hashtag it with hashtag #RawUmberLive. I'd like to thank Lizet for drawing along with us today, and you can download the photographs you've seen in this week's session from the link I'm about to show you on the screen. You can follow us on Instagram and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and don't forget to like this video if you've enjoyed it. Thank you. Goodbye. We run free portrait drawing sessions every Sunday at 2 p.m. and figure drawing sessions every Wednesday at 8 p.m. We're now offering a Raw Umber subscription where you can watch all our figure drawing sessions, past, present and future, for under £10 a month. See our website for more details.